The sun dipped low across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and fire. Children's laughter carried on the wind, mixing with the rhythm of footsteps pounding against the dusty track near the edge of the small town. At the center of it all was Alina, a 16-year-old girl whose speed and spirit made her stand out from everyone else. She wasn't just running, she was flying. Her long black ponytail whipped against her back, her cheeks flushed with determination, and her eyes burned with the thrill of movement. For Alina, running wasn't just a pastime, it was freedom, it was the roar of life inside her chest, the proof that she was alive and untouchable. Her friends often called her the Lioness, not because she was fierce in looks, but because her courage made her fearless, her will unshakable. That evening, after finishing her practice laps, she slung her schoolbooks under one arm and began walking home. The streets were quiet, lined with trees that whispered as the evening breeze brushed against their leaves. She hummed softly, already planning tomorrow's training, already imagining how fast she might one day become. She dreamed of competing in races bigger than the ones her school held, dreamed of medals, of making her mother proud. For her, the future stretched wide and bright. But fate has a cruel way of striking when dreams are at their strongest. As Alina reached the crossing near the marketplace, she stepped onto the road. The sound came first, the sharp, horrifying screech of tires tearing against asphalt. Her head snapped to the side, and in that split second, the world slowed. A car was hurtling toward her, headlights glaring like wild eyes, the driver's face pale with panic as he fought the wheel. Her books slipped from her grip, pages scattering into the air like frightened birds. She froze for a heartbeat, too shocked to move, and then impact exploded through her body. The force flung her sideways, her body collapsing onto the hard ground. The pain was searing, immediate, and merciless. Her legs felt like fire, then suddenly like nothing at all. Voices screamed around her, people rushing, the chaos of panic filling her ears. The sky above blurred, her vision fading in and out as blood pounded in her head. She tried to move, tried to push herself up, but her lower body would not respond. Fear unlike anything she had ever known clawed at her chest, the realization that something was terribly, terribly wrong. Sirens wailed in the distance, but to Alina, time had already fractured. She drifted in and out of consciousness as strangers, hands tried to keep her awake. She could hear her mother's voice somewhere in the haze, calling her name with a mixture of terror and pleading. And then the hospital lights swallowed her, cold and merciless, before darkness took her completely. When Alina finally opened her eyes days later, the sterile white ceiling loomed above her. The truth came like a dagger. Her legs lay still, unmoving, wrapped in bandages that told a story she could not accept. Doctor's words blurred together, spinal injury, paralysis, rehabilitation, but all she heard was silence in her body where there should have been movement. The lioness who once ran free had fallen, caged in a body that no longer obeyed. In that moment, the girl who once outran the wind realized that her life had split into two halves, before and after the accident. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. Friends, if this story touches your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more heartfelt tales. The days after the accident bled into one another like an endless gray canvas, each one colder than the last. Alina sat by the window of her small bedroom, the wheelchair locked in place, her hands resting idly in her lap. Outside, life moved on. The children she once led in races now played without her, their laughter ringing through the street like a cruel reminder of what she had lost. She watched them with hollow eyes, her chest aching with the longing to join, to feel the ground under her feet, to chase the wind again. But her legs remained still, strangers to her own commands. At first, her friends visited. They brought flowers, awkward smiles, and words that felt rehearsed. "Get well soon, you're so strong, we're here for you." But soon the visits grew fewer. The texts and calls slowed until they stopped altogether. Their absence hurt more than the silence of her legs. It was as if they had moved on, leaving her behind in a shadow she couldn't escape. The girl who was once the center of attention, admired for her speed and courage, was now invisible. Inside her room, the walls pressed in on her like a prison. Her sketchbooks lay unopened, gathering dust on the desk where she once filled pages with dreams and doodles. Now she couldn't bring herself to pick up a pencil. What use was there in drawing futures that she could never live? Nights were the worst. The house would grow quiet, and she would lie awake staring at the ceiling, tears sliding silently into her pillow. She replayed the accident again and again, the screech of tires, the flash of headlights, the sudden impact. She asked herself what she could have done differently. If she had left school a minute earlier, if she had walked faster, would she still be whole? The questions gnawed at her until sleep finally pulled her under. And yet, in her darkest hours, there was one light that never left. Her mother would slip quietly into her room, carrying the scent of home-cooked meals and warm tea. She would sit beside Alina's bed, stroking her hair as if she were still a little girl. Her voice was soft but steady, a whisper of strength. "My lioness," she would say, kissing Alina's forehead, "the jungle may change, but a lioness never loses her roar." Alina didn't always believe those words, but she held onto them, tucking them deep inside her aching heart. Because even if the world had forgotten her, her mother's faith was a lifeline. Still, the shadows lingered, wrapping tighter around her every day. She was alive, yes, but inside, she wondered if she was truly living anymore. The rehabilitation center smelled of antiseptic and quiet determination. Every corner echoed with the sound of effort, weights clinking, crutches tapping, strained breaths as patients wrestled with bodies that no longer obeyed them. Alina wheeled herself in reluctantly at first, her eyes lowered, her spirit still shackled by the belief that nothing here could bring back what she had lost. The therapists greeted her with warm encouragement, but their words felt like empty air. She went through the motions half-heartedly, lifting her arms, stretching her back, pushing the wheels of her chair with sluggish resistance. Each attempt only reminded her of her limitations, of the legs that refused to wake beneath her. But then, one afternoon, she noticed her. A girl not much older than herself, sitting in a chair almost identical to hers. This girl's arms trembled as she struggled to push herself across the therapy room. Sweat clung to her forehead, her face etched with effort, but on her lips was a smile, wide and unyielding. Each push forward was met with a little gasp of triumph, a quiet laugh at her own progress. She was fragile, yet she radiated strength. And for the first time in months, Alina felt a flicker of something inside her chest that was not pain or despair, it was awe. That image stayed with her. If that girl could smile through struggle, why couldn't she? Alina began to push harder the next day. Her arms ached, her palms blistered, but she kept going. Every lap across the therapy hall felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. The blisters turned into calluses, the weakness into strength. The therapists noticed the change, the way her eyes no longer looked empty, the way her breathing carried determination. At night, back in her room, Alina opened her old sketchbook for the first time since the accident. Her hands trembled as she drew lines across the blank page, designs for a wheelchair that could move faster, built stronger, one that didn't just carry people but gave them wings. Each stroke of her pencil felt like breathing again. She wasn't just existing anymore, she was imagining, creating, fighting. For the first time since the car crash, Alina didn't just see what she had lost. She saw what she could build. The spark had been lit, and in the ashes of her despair, the lioness stirred once more. The day of the school sports festival dawned bright and restless, the sky a canvas of deep blue as banners fluttered in the morning breeze. The field was alive with energy, students in colorful jerseys warming up, the sound of whistles slicing through the air, parents filling the stands with eager chatter. It was the kind of day Alina once lived for, when she had been the fastest runner in school, the one everyone watched with admiration. But today, as she wheeled herself onto the track in her chair, the stares she felt were different. Some were curious, some doubtful, and some pitying. Whispers rippled across the crowd, "Is she really going to race? What's the point?" But Alina kept her gaze steady, her hands gripping the wheels tightly. Inside, her heart pounded like a drum, a mix of fear and determination battling for space in her chest. This wasn't just a race. It was the battlefield where she would prove, to herself and to everyone else, that the lioness within her was alive. The months of training had brought her here, the sleepless nights, the blisters, the sketches that fueled her imagination. This was her moment to roar. The referee called the participants to the starting line. A few other wheelchair users had signed up, their faces etched with the same nervous hope. Alina positioned herself beside them, her mother watching from the stands with hands clasped tightly, tears already brimming in her eyes. For a moment, silence swallowed the noise around her. All she could hear was the wind brushing against her face and her own breath, heavy and fast. She whispered silently to herself, "Lioness, remember who you are." The whistle blew. Alina launched forward with a force she didn't know she had. Her arms pumped hard, her palms digging into the wheels as the chair surged ahead. The track blurred beneath her, the crowd erupting into shouts that melted into background noise. Pain flared in her shoulders, her hands screamed from the pressure, but she didn't slow. Each push was a declaration, each turn of the wheel a roar against the silence that had chained her for so long. The other racers fell behind as Alina powered forward, her body trembling with exertion but her spirit blazing with fire. She could feel the sting of sweat dripping down her face, the burn of her muscles, the ache in her lungs, but she welcomed it. This was not weakness. This was strength in its purest form. The finish line drew closer, white paint across the track shimmering in the sun like destiny itself. With one final push, she crossed it, first. Her chest heaved, her arms quivered, but her eyes filled with tears that blurred the world around her. The crowd roared, standing to their feet in disbelief and awe. Her mother sobbed openly in the stands, clapping. With every ounce of pride she had. In that moment, Alina wasn't just the girl in a wheelchair. She wasn't just a victim of fate. She was a lioness, fierce and free, reclaiming her roar. The sound of the cheering crowd from that race didn't fade away with the setting sun, it lived on, carried forward by the videos students captured on their phones. Within hours, clips of Alina's victory flooded social media, spreading beyond her school, beyond her town, until strangers across the country watched in awe as a girl in a wheelchair raced like her life depended on it and crossed the finish line first. The comments poured in, words of admiration, encouragement, and gratitude. People who had never met her wrote about how her strength gave them hope in their own battles. Some said she reminded them that they weren't alone. Some admitted they had been ready to give up, until they saw her. The girl who once felt invisible now found herself shining brighter than ever. Opportunities began to unfold like doors she never thought existed. Schools invited her to speak to students, to share her story of pain, resilience, and rediscovery. Standing, or rather, sitting, before crowded halls, she told them what it felt like to lose everything she thought defined her, and how she found something greater inside herself. Her words were not polished speeches but raw, unfiltered truth, and they touched hearts more deeply than rehearsed inspiration ever could. She spoke not as a victim, but as a fighter, and people listened because they could see the lioness in her eyes. Organizations reached out to support her sketches and designs, offering resources and mentorship to turn her wheelchair concepts into reality. Engineers collaborated with her, and together they began developing models that could move faster, smoother, and stronger. Alina wasn't just chasing her own freedom anymore, she was building it for others, ensuring no one in her position would ever feel trapped the way she once did. What started as pencil drawings in a lonely room became prototypes, and soon enough, hope in motion. Her mother watched it all with pride so vast it often brought her to tears. She had always told Alina that a lioness never loses her roar, and now the world was hearing it loud and clear. Neighbors who once whispered pity now spoke her name with respect. The same streets where she once felt like a prisoner in her chair now became paths she wheeled through with her head held high, strangers stopping her to thank her, children pointing and smiling at the wheelchair lioness. But for Alina, the greatest victory was not the applause, not the recognition, not even the projects she was building. It was the quiet moments, when she wheeled herself alone beneath the sky, and instead of longing for what she had lost, she felt gratitude for the strength she had gained. The accident had taken her legs, but it had given her a voice that roared louder than footsteps ever could. And so, the girl who once believed her life had ended on that road rose to become a symbol of resilience and courage. She wasn't defined by her wheelchair. She was defined by her refusal to surrender, by the fire that kept burning even in the darkest nights. She was no longer just Alina. To the world, she was the wheelchair lioness, and her roar would echo for generations. If this story moved you, please share it, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more stories of love, redemption, and hope.